I love a good marketing campaign, something that kind of, gets people back into a store or like to buy a new product. I'm a sucker for a limited edition candy bar. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. Yeah, I will buy anything as long as it's actually new.
The Oreo flavors do a good job of that, I have to say.
Well, back in 1998, Burger King came up with a Whopper of a marketing campaign.
Matt's doing dad jokes. I don't remember this at all. Oh, wait, I was in London. I'm just joking.
I was in London.
I was going to try and go the whole episode without mentioning it, but I couldn't.
Is that like a Royale with cheese? No, actually.
No.
That's France.
That was a quarter
That's France.
That's
yeah.
France. Well, for April Fool's Day in 1998, Burger King took out
so
a full
already.
full page ad in the USA Today introducing a Whopper specifically designed for left-handed customers.
People are dumb.
They are dumb.
People are... A sucker is born every minute, said P.T. Barnum like almost 150 years ago, and it's fucking true.
I would have said that the marketing department of Burger King was dumb. I mean, what a dumb idea, but apparently it worked.
Well, and that's thousands of customers swarm Burger King
requesting
the new Lefty Whopper.
And even in the ad, it said contains it's just like the Whopper, but it's rotated 180 degrees. No, 180 degrees that way. It's just that way, Allie. It looks like the same burger. It's just you pick
it up with your left hand.
You pick it up with your left hand, so it's like it's turned around. Okay.
Also, Whoppers are trash. I said it.
Not wrong. I mean, it's a funny April Fool's joke, but the fact that people swarm in for a product that doesn't actually exist or actually has always existed is just...
And I bet the Burger King staff had no idea what these people were talking about. Can I get a Lefty Whopper?
They had no idea. And you know what? This is a perfect entree to this movie because people are real fucking dumb.
We don't have your communist burger here. I'm sorry. This is a United States product.
Man, this is a Wendy's.
Welcome to the Rewind Project, where Allie, Matt, and Eric take another look at your favorite milestone movies through the lens of our present day. Will it be a skip, rent, or buy? Stay tuned and find out.
Okay, folks, let's get into it. This is the Rewind Project. I am Eric.
I'm Allie.
I'm Matt.
And today we are talking about one of the biggest cult movies ever made. This is a film called The Big Lebowski, released in 1998, written and directed by Joel and Ethan Coen, although we were still in the phase where only one of them was taking screen credit for directing, although they were both totally co-directing this movie.
I saw that. And I thought that was weird. I didn't remember they went through a period where it wasn't just always the two of them for everything.
Early on, it was just like, we'll be taken more seriously if we just have one direct. But they were both co-directing the movie. Everyone in the movie is like, we took direction from both of them all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's a Coen Brothers joint. Notable achievements for this movie. Nominated for 0 Oscars. Or really any other major award out there. Although it was, years later in 2014, inducted into the National Film Registry, because it's one of those stories where when it came out, critics didn't love it. It wasn't a big hit, but it just kind of over time, people discovered it, and then it snowballed and it turned into something big. So I don't usually say things like this when we get to the notable achievements part of our show, but 2 species of spiders.
I can't.
Anolosimus Big Lebowski and Anolosimus Dude are named after the film's character, the Dude. The annual Lebowski Fest has been held in 14 U.S. cities since 2002, and most of the stars of the Big Lebowski have made appearances at the Lebowski Fest, which features lots of White Russians, lots of beer, unlimited bowling. They're always held in a bowling alley, and thousands of people show up and bowl all night long as part of Lebowski Fest.
I was just going to say, can you imagine like the amount of half and half that they must go through in the Lebowski Fest? It's like...
I would imagine if you're bowling a lot, it's mostly beer, I would guess. The dude drinks some beer too. The dude did pick up a couple of brewskis at one point when he was saying goodbye to Sam Elliott. And finally, this movie spawned a religion.
Of course it did.
Dudism. The Church of the Latter-day Dude is literally what it's called. And it was formed in 2005 and has since ordained over 220,000 dudist priests who do perform weddings and all that kind of stuff. It's like it's a religion that really promotes going with the flow, man.
I feel like I could get behind this actual religion. I think this is one that I could actually go to church on weekday.
If I had to practice a religion, I would maybe practice Dudism. Yes.
No, my type A personality would not allow me to go to that church. I think that I would want to murder everyone. This kind of reminds me, I've done I don't know if you guys have ever heard the Flying Spaghetti Monster, but I've done that show, and that also has spawned a religion. So it just is funny to me, what people get out of certain artistic things.
The Flying Spaghetti Monster is more... It's a joke religion, right? I mean, this is not. This one kind of is not. I mean, they're like gatherings.
Oh, Jesus Christ Almighty!
And, the Pastafarians. It's more of a
philosophy.
The Pastafarians, those who follow the Flying Spaghetti Monster, basically say, you believe in Jesus. I believe in a flying spaghetti monster. Prove it's not true. That's where the Flying Spaghetti Monster kind of comes into play. This actually, I mean, to Matt's point, there is a way of life. There is kind of a philosophy at play in the workings of the dude.
I weep for humanity.
Well, that's just like your opinion, man. And here we go. So let's get into the plot, as it were, of this movie. A lot of stuff happens. It's very episodic. I mean, something's always going on. But at the end of the movie, not a lot has happened, with one, big exception. Here's the plot, though. An unemployed slacker. We don't know how he makes his money. Interesting. An early edition of the screenplay noted that the dude was the heir to the Rubik's Cube fortune, and actually had a lot of money, but just preferred the simple life. And then Joel Cohen said, that's dumb, and nobody cares, so let's just take it out. So we know that the dude doesn't have a job.
Fun. It's like a fun detail.
Yeah, we know the dude doesn't have a job, and he gets along just fine. I mean, he can write a check for his half and half at the grocery store.
Guys, I remember writing checks at the grocery store. So my dad, he doesn't have an ATM card for a variety of reasons. And, now my mom just gives him cash. But for a long time, he used to go to the Bank of Giant, and he would go to Giant and write a check for, let's say the groceries were $10.49. He would write a check for $40.29, and they would give him $30. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bank of Giant.
Much like the movie we're discussing, we're meandering a lot today, if you haven't noticed. So let me start again. The plot of this movie: an unemployed slacker gets caught up in the kidnapping, big scare quotes around kidnapping, of his namesake's wife. Apparently there are two Jeff Lebowskis in L.A. I can believe that. One of them is a billionaire, big scare quotes around billionaire, and the other one is this dude who calls himself the dude and lives in a crappy apartment with an old tattered rug.
Really ties the room together.
That really ties the room together, and a toilet where he never puts the seat down, unfortunately for him. So let's get into this cast. And I have to say, I mean, some of us liked this movie. Some of us did not like this movie. We're going to get into it. I do understand why you wouldn't like this movie, because I'll be honest with you, I didn't like it much 25 years ago. 25 years ago, I saw it and I was like, "What is the big deal?" Like that, and it came out right after Fargo. It was the Coen brothers' next movie, and I loved Fargo, still do. And I went to this one and I was like, And then it became this huge thing, and I never understood it. And then I went back to it just for this podcast, and I was like, "Oh, I think I kind of get it now." So I've rediscovered something from doing the Rewind Project. I will say, though, even when I didn't like it, I thought the cast was great. I mean, the performance.
Yes, I agree. I concede that point. Like, everybody in this cast is, at the top of their game in 1998. Full stop.
So let's get into it. Jeff Bridges as the dude. Best hair ever in a movie, maybe?
I loved his hair. Like, I don't really like long hair on guys.
Me neither.
Like, he wears it so well. He's got amazing hair.
I just wanted to run my fingers through his hair the entire time. Of course, I would catch a globule of half and half, I'm sure, but...
Yeah, I didn't want to do that. But I did like the one point when they're in the bowling alley, and he just casually, like, brings out a hair clip to tie his hair back so he could bowl, and I loved that detail.
You have to. Again, another little fun fact about this movie, we never see the dude bowl. Ever. The closest we get is in a dream sequence when he is like bowling with Julianne Moore. But we never actually see him, you know, and that was not by design, because they made Steve Buscemi, John Goodman, and Jeff Bridges all take bowling lessons during the rehearsal process for the show, so they could all, like, you know, adopt a form that would make it look like they go bowling a lot. And anytime that he was bowling, they cut it. But apparently from all his bowling lessons, he knew that his hair would get in his eyes, so he had to use a hair clip to, you know, get hair out of his eyes.
I love to bowl, and I don't do it nearly enough.
Me neither.
It's a perfect sport for this movie because it's a very zen sport. You're not competing against other people. You're competing against yourself, so you're always improving yourself.
Oh, you've never been in a league. You are absolutely competing against other people.
No. What you're actually trying to do is get your best score, and you're hoping your best score is beats other people's best scores. But it's not like you are constantly, like in like basketball, football, or baseball, trying to stop other people from scoring, where that is an actual competition in a different way. This is actually just about self-improvement, where everybody is trying to be their best, really is the way that bowling works. And, you know, the person that ends up competing and getting the best score is the one that wins. But there's no way I can prevent somebody else legally in bowling from actually scoring high. So this is in my opinion, it's a very zen sport, and it's a perfect sport for this movie.
Unless you want to accuse someone of stepping over the line.
That was a funny scene. In Tulsa, the bowling alley is called the Dust Bowl. It's a little Great Depression nod here in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
That's perfect.
That's awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, the dude. You know, somebody once came up to Jeff Bridges while they were long after they made this movie, but you know, said to him, you know, did you study Zen when you were on the set of this movie? And he's like, no. Like, we didn't have any conversations about religion or spirituality or anything. But people who, again, dudism, are all into this, like, Zen movement, you know, they think that this character is, like, the perfect embodiment of just, you know, the dude abides.
The dude abides, man. He was wonderful. Like, I loved every minute of him on screen.
He was very good. He's not my favorite in this movie, but he was very good. And you know, of course, now you can't imagine anybody else in that part because it's so iconic for him, for the role, for the movie, all that stuff.
It's like Indiana Jones. Like, I could not imagine Tom Selleck as Indiana Jones now. I mean, it has to be Harrison Ford. So it's the same kind of concept.
Well, you can watch Quigley Down Under. You don't have to imagine Tom Selleck as Indiana Jones. That's pretty much what that movie is. But
pass.
I mean, there's no Tom Selleck slander on this podcast. I do love Tom Selleck. It was a formative. Magnum PI was a formative show for my growing up years. Let's just put it that way.
Discovered a love for mustaches.
No, I mean, not really mustaches, but the general demeanor of Tom Selleck for sure.
I do appreciate the fact that Jeff Bridges, to the extent that he can, because he is a beautiful man, but he kind of let himself go a little bit for this movie. He talked about that. He was like, you know, I was happy that this film was not going to require any kind of workout routine because, you know, and he did kind of, you know, show up a little dad body, but I was happy with that because that's, you know, if he was too good, which he's just I mean, you know, from the neck up, he's a beautiful man. But he grew that scraggly beard to kind of make him look, I think they grew out the hair in an attempt to make him look like not so good, but the hair looked so good. It looked so good. Can't get over that hair. But, you know, he really did embody this person. And in fact, Jeff Bridges came to the Coen brothers after reading the script and said, is this based on me in high school? Because this was me.
Oh, that's funny.
He was a stoner surfer, like whatever, man, like guy. That was just what he. My other favorite little bit about Jeff Bridges in this movie is that every time he didn't want much direction, and apparently the Coen brothers don't really direct actors so much. They bring in actors who are going to bring a lot to what they're doing. All Jeff Bridges wanted to know. Before every scene, he was like, hey, did the dude burn one over before this scene started? And sometimes they would say yes, and he would go away and rub his eyes to make them all bloodshot before he would start the scene. And he would play it a little extra high.
That's awesome.
That was the extent of the direction he needed for this movie. Let's move on to John Goodman as Walter Sobchak.
I love him so much. I will love him in everything that he does, always and forever.
Even when he's an asshole, you still like him.
Oh God, he's so fucking funny.
Yeah, I just like even like on
Calmer Than You Are,
The Righteous Gemstones.
I'm calmer than you are.
And I mean, like all the shit he said was true. It wasn't bunnies to know. It was, you know what I mean? Like she wasn't kidnapped. Like, you know, he was a truth teller the whole time. He just doesn't go about it the right way.
Well, the dude was the first one that maybe thought she wasn't kidnapped.
Right.
Yeah. But then he took it and ran. And then when he started having his doubts, Walter was like, nope, we've made a decision.
The line where he says, I can get you a toe with nail polish by 3 p.m., that was the funniest line in the whole movie for me. Because you don't doubt that Walter has a person, guy or gal, who can get him a toe by 3 p.m. with green nail polish on it.
Well, and so much of this stuff that I really dove down deep into a YouTube rabbit hole about the Big Lebowski only because there's so much stuff out there to look at. People have so much to say about this movie. But one of the things that was kind of a recurring theme is that John Goodman thinks he's such an alpha male, right? And acts that way around all of his guy friends. But he's a complete pushover for this ex-wife that we never see.
Cynthia. The Jew.
Yes, the Orthodox Jew that he converted to Orthodox Judaism and then won't let it go because he made a decision.
Erev Shabbos. I was dying.
And then, like, you know, takes care of her dog whenever she leaves town with her new boyfriend. Like, you know, there's something about this woman that has got him wrapped around her little pinky. And yet he's such a hard ass to everyone else. One of my favorite lines in this whole movie was when Jeff Bridges was like, you're not wrong, man. You're just an asshole. And I was like, yes.
Well, and honestly, without John Goodman's character, without Walter, I mean, we have even less of a movie because it's his poor decisions and
cockamamie ideas.
Yes, that really keep this going and like cause all the trouble in the entire time and like make it worse each time.
Well, if it was just up to the dude, nothing would ever happen because he doesn't care that much. Right. And the only thing that gets him to spur him to any kind of action is when somebody ruins his rug because it really tied the whole room together. After that, it's Walter that, you know, throws the underwear out the car and starts all these shenanigans and takes a golf club to the neighbor's Corvette and all this other kind of, you know, bullshit. By the way, there's an album out there called Stranger in the Alps, and it was named after the TV cut of this movie. Apparently there's so many F words in this movie that when they went in to loop it for the basic cable clean version, they had to come up with they encouraged the cast just to get creative. And by the time John Goodman was looping that scene where he says 5 million times, this is what happens when you fuck a stranger in the ass, it became, this is what happens when you find a stranger in the Alps. Makes no sense whatsoever, but that's what John Goodman said 5,000 times. And apparently a lot of people who discovered this movie first on basic cable, that's become like one of their favorite lines of the whole movie, and it's not even in the movie.
That is funny.
Let's talk about Steve Buscemi, who, again, right after Fargo, and Steve Buscemi made such an impact in Fargo. And this guy who would not shut up and he was kind of funny looking, right? I mean, he was kind of funny looking. And in this one, both Matt and I watched this movie together and we were like, he kind of looks like this normal guy in this movie. Like, he just doesn't have that Steve Buscemi weirdness.
I thought he was kind of like underutilized in this movie. personally. I mean, I always like more Steve Buscemi than less. So I don't know.
Well, Steve thought he was underused when he first read the script. He was like, "You want me to play who?"
Yeah.
Because like Donnie's barely in there, and John Turturro had the same reaction actually, because they wrote the roles specifically for Jeff Bridges, John Goodman, Steve Buscemi, and John Turturro. All four of them. They kind of have these actors in mind when they wrote this script. And Steve Buscemi was like, anybody could play this guy. But then he got to the final scene. Spoiler alert, the one thing that happens in this movie, folks, is that Donnie does not live to see the final reel. And in the scene where Walter discovers that Donnie's having a heart attack and is trying to save his life and saying, come on, man, you're going to make it. And after doing nothing but abusing this guy for 2 hours, Steve Buscemi thought that was just oddly touching in a very Coen Brothers kind of way. It just showed that these guys really do love each other, even though Walter does nothing but heap abuse on Donnie for the first 2 hours of this film.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that. I mean, good for Steve Buscemi for taking it, but I don't know if I don't know if I would have taken this role, especially coming off of Fargo.
Well, and that's the thing is like I forgot that Fargo came out before this movie. And so as we're watching it, I'm like, oh, he looks normal here. And whereas I remember in Fargo, and maybe it's just the power of suggestion, kind of funny looking. Like I always think of Steve Buscemi as a very odd looking human being. And I feel like he's gotten odder looking as he gets older.
True.
And so I kind of assumed Fargo happened after this movie, but it's weird to think that it actually happened
No,
beforehand.
and I think a lot of it was just they really accentuated his eyes. He had that weird goatee. I think he grew out his hair, so it was just a little bit, and they just made all of his weird features look weirder. And this one, they just gave him a normal haircut and shaved his face and just said, you're Donnie. You're like this normal guy.
Yeah, you're wearing a bowling shirt.
So he acted like Donnie, the normal guy, and that was kind of what he did.
That must live in the bowling alley, because I don't know that. I guess he was in the car with them when they went to the kid's house. That's the only time he leaves the bowling alley.
Well, and then at the end,
they're going to end out.
At the end, when the nihilists catch them outside, he's outside there too. Yeah. Yes, he's and only Walter seems to really interact with Donnie. Remember that. It'll come up later in the show. Let's move on to Julianne Moore. I love Julianne Moore. Have you seen this new movie Sharper on Apple TV Plus?
No.
I've seen
with Sebastian Stan and Julianne Moore.
Oh, I do love Sebastian Stan. Yum.
It is terrific. It is a really, really good movie. And it's one of those movies that you kind of realize, oh, I just saw something, but it's not what I thought I saw, because someone's got someone's playing a game. Someone's pulling a grift. But then everyone's grifting everybody. And by the time the whole, it's all over, you're not quite sure who's on the level and who's conning who. And it's really, really good. And Julianne Moore plays this woman who basically, she's the Bunny Lebowski of Sharper. She gets herself married to a hapless billionaire who has no idea that he's being had, played by John Lithgow. It's so good. Anyway, go see Sharper. 25 years later, Julianne Moore is still fucking amazing.
True.
But let's talk a little bit about Maud Lebowski. It's
the best circle griff you'll see on TV.
I don't remember her in this movie at all. And that was a treat when she popped up. And I loved her sort of Katharine Hepburn accent and, the way she sort of just glided through her scenes and, she didn't give a fuck about anything. And then she was like, I want somebody's baby who I don't have to interact with in any way, shape or form. I was like, okay, Maud.
I called it immediately though. As soon as she started crouching up in the bed, I was like, she's trying to get pregnant.
Yep.
I'm like, I've seen that move before. Yeah. And the first time I saw this movie, one of the few things I remembered was her flying in the harness with the paint
naked
over naked, doing her kind of Yoko Ono shtick.
One of the best character introductions ever on screen. That was amazing.
And actually, she was introduced for a moment before. She was leering over when he wakes up on his new rug with.
Oh, that's true.
On the other side. You do see her for an instant. But then, yes, when the character is truly introduced, when he meets her really, she's flying naked in a harness, painting a canvas, making her vaginal art.
Does that word bother you?
What I don't get is why the dude? Because she's interested in having his child from the get-go. So I think because she automatically is Go and see this doctor. Go and see this doctor.
He's good and thorough.
So she definitely wants the dude's kid. I guess there must be something about the dude and his energy that she just couldn't get enough of. And she thought he would make really good genetic material for a child.
Well, if it's a boy, it's not going to go bald because that hair. Oh, my God.
Well, it's her dad's problem. So actually, because it genetically falls on her father's side.
Well,
yeah, I'm screwed.
Whatever. Well, and someone asked the Coen brothers later, it's like, is there some kind of psychological imprint that she really wants the father of her child to have her same last name? And it's like, we really didn't think about it that deeply. No.
They could be related down the line.
They could be. I mean, Lebowski is it's not unheard of, but I mean, it's very likely that there is a common Lebowski family in Poland that they all come from.
Well, one of the conspiracy theories I read was that Jeff Bridges was the Big Lebowski's illegitimate son, and he had a son with his housemaid and then, banished them from the house. And so that was one conspiracy theory. So that would make a really fucked up situation for Maude.
Well, yes, that's too bad for Maude, but it is a plausible theory. I mean, and maybe this housemaid named him Jeff after his father so that he would have his father's name. That's actually not a bad... And maybe that, constantly sends him checks, and therefore
he doesn't really have to work.
And maybe that's why. Maybe that's why the Big Lebowski freaks out so much when he shows up, because it's like, you're not supposed to be here. And then when he finds out it's about a rug, he's like, oh, let me just yell at this guy so he never wants to come back.
Well, that was in the theory, they were saying that that's why he's so disappointed when the dude comes to his house, because he's like, he knows who it is, and he's like, you've amounted for nothing, basically.
Okay,
and that's why he does that.
What? I can buy that for $1.
I like that much better than the Rubik's Cube idea of where he gets this money. Because if he's actually a millionaire, then there's no point of going out and trying to get the $1 million, because he's the kind of guy that would just take care of Walter. He'd give him cash whenever he needed it. So there's no reason for the story to actually happen.
Oh, Walter doesn't need a reason to want $1 million in a briefcase.
I guess that's probably true too.
I don't need a reason to want $1 million. Come on. I mean, I know $1 million in 2023 money is less than $1 million in 98, but still.
Well, I wouldn't steal $1 million though if I thought a woman might die if I didn't deliver.
No, I mean, I do have some limits.
So that's Walter.
It's not even her toe. It's just not going to die.
And you know what? It wasn't her toe.
It was not.
When you find out whose toe it was, we're going to get there too. David Huddleston played the titular character, the Big Lebowski, which a lot of people think the movie's named after Jeff Bridges. It's not, because the dude actually refers to his namesake as the Big Lebowski. David Huddleston, who I feel like I've seen in something before, but I looked up his credits and I can't figure out for the life of me where I know this guy from.
I did the same thing, and I was like, I know he looks so familiar, but maybe it's just he's an old guy in a wheelchair and we've kind of seen that before. I don't know.
I mean, there's a type.
He also looks like the guy that plays the Hudsucker.
Wearing Hudsucker? Yeah, that was Charles Durning.
Yeah, he looks a little bit like him.
Looks a little bit like him. He looks a little bit like Dick Cheney, actually. David Huddleston.
Oh my gosh, you got
maybe that's where I think I've seen him before. It's like Dick Cheney's in the movie. Maybe Christian Bale as Dick Cheney looks exactly like David Huddleston.
Well, that's really going down the rabbit hole.
But I mean, I love that movie. I've seen it twice, so maybe that's why I feel like I knew him. Anyway, he's just this asshole who is kind of like Sharper. He's more of a con man than you think. I mean, you think he's this billionaire victim of a kidnapping, but in fact, he's kind of playing his own game, trying to, ditch his wife without any culpability and keep $1 million that wasn't really his for himself. Anyway, which is interesting.
Played it well. Kind of hated him every time he was on screen. It was just that kind of grating personality that you're like, oh, you asshole. But yeah, I enjoyed him.
He was in Blazing Saddles. Maybe that's how we all know him from. So.
And I don't remember him from, but I'll watch it again and I'll see. Yeah,
David Huddleston. Yeah, and he was in The West Wing. He's been a character actor for a long time.
So maybe I've just seen him. Maybe it's one of those things like, my Margot Martindale story.
Right.
You just know her, and it's like, I know you. I know you, and she's like, no, you don't.
He was fine. I didn't chime in on him, but like that's the kind of guy you want to play a character like the Big Lebowski.
Sure.
But I did like the fact that it's not funny, but it's funny when Walter was like his he didn't even think his paralysis was real, and he lifts him up, and you're like, yeah, yikes. It was. Spoiler, it was.
Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But, he just fell to the ground and started crying. Walter felt bad anyway. You'd think after, clubbing somebody's Corvette on the street and getting it wrong, you might learn to control those urges, but Walter will never learn.
No, he's not going to ever dial it back. No.
One of these days, he will be right.
Well, like a broken clock, right?
Yeah.
The late, great Philip Seymour Hoffman as Brant, who I don't think Philip Seymour Hoffman was fucking Philip Seymour Hoffman by the time he made this. I think this is still fairly early in his career, is it not?
What did we watch last year? It was the
Boogie Nights, that was his first movie.
So yeah,
this is pretty early on for Philip Seymour Hoffman. He had yet to prove the how deep he could go, but boy was he funny as this sycophantic little. He was Smithers basically.
Smithers.
He plays a good beta.
Yeah, what I liked about him is that he appropriately called the dude, and he as a good executive assistant, you pick up on those things, and the Big Lebowski refused to refer to him as the dude, but Brant got right on that and was like, I don't know, dude, and so this stuffed shirt saying dude a lot was very funny.
Well, there's this whole thing about one of the big conspiracy theories about this movie is that it's a big takeoff on Alice in Wonderland. And that there's a lot of Alice in Wonderland symbolism throughout the movie. Sure. And the first time they notice this is when Philip Seymour Hoffman is showing them the key to the city of Pasadena. Because if you remember, when Alice shrinks for the first time, she's next to this key that is just giant. And that's the first Alice in Wonderland kind of piece that's in there. There was an Alice in Wonderland. There were a couple. When I saw the little video that kind of went into this particular conspiracy theory, there was listen, little nods here and there just to let you know that you're experiencing something weird. I'm fine with it. Maybe that was intentional. Maybe it wasn't. I mean, that's the kind of thing that can sneak into stuff because, if Joel and Ethan Coen watched Disney's Alice in Wonderland more than 3 times as kids, some of that stuff can just linger in your mind. So anyway.
I don't know. I feel like people need to get some hobbies, is what I think.
Why get a hobby when you can just watch this movie 5,000 times and come up with all of these theories? Let's talk a little bit about John Turturro as Jesus, not Jesus, Jesus Quintana. Nobody fucks with the Jesus.
The hairnet was the best part. Every time they would turn to look at show that, it made me laugh.
Oh, the coke nail was just
painted cocaine nail,
8-year-old kids, man.
Probably problematic now that he played it, but I fucking loved him in the character, and he was amazing.
Well, and he brought it back. Last year, there was a show on HBO Max called Jesus Rolls. That even though the Coen brothers said we will never make a sequel to The Big Lebowski, I don't think they do sequels anyway. I don't think they've ever made a sequel.
They don't.
But people ask them all the time, are you going to do a sequel? And they're like, nope. But John Turturro apparently went to them and said, can I have the rights to this character? Because I really want to play Jesus again. And they were like, fine. Anyway, everyone hated the show. It got completely panned. Nobody watched it. Big flop. But he did bring it back. I don't want Jesus Quintana to be the lead in anything. He's much better off to the side where he can go, ew, and then move on.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad John Turturro recovered and made Severance, is what I'm saying.
Severance is fucking awesome.
Oh my God, I can't wait. When is season 2? Come on now.
Soon. I mean, coming. It's coming.
It's coming.
I mentioned this guy only because he is kind of a legend among actors. Ben Gazzara is a fucking big deal, and he's in this movie for a hot second as Jackie Treehorn, the pornographer who has a big party on the beach. And it's just one of those felt very Tarantino-esque when you saw him for the first time, walk right up to the camera and speak right into it. Hey, dude, nice to meet you. Welcome to the party. And then takes him up and gives him a drugged white Russian and wants to know where the fuck his money is. Because he was the one Bunny Lebowski, the wife of the Big Lebowski, owed money to that got this whole thing started. And it was his thugs that showed up to his apartment in the very first scene and dunked the dude's head in a toilet and peed on his rug.
Who is Ben Gazzara? Why would I know him?
Ben Gazzara he's got some Golden Globes, he's got some Emmys, but he's mostly a stage actor. He kind of came out of the New York studio and I think he has some Tony Awards.
All right.
He was a big deal. I don't know if he was in the original cast because I think he's too young. But he came back. He played Brick in Cat in a Hot Tin Roof on Broadway at one point, and everyone loved him. He's just like this, really great actor. The films of John Cassavetes, I want to say he's in a lot of those. So if you're like deep into 70s cinema, he was in quite a few of those things. But he's like he's the kind of, I'm surprised and maybe Tarantino has him. He feels like the kind of actor that Quentin Tarantino or the Coen brothers would like pull out of nowhere and say, "Hey, play this little bit part in my movie."
Yeah, come in for a day. We'll give you a day rate. Like
exactly.
Yeah,
which is what John Turturro did. He was there for 2 days, solid. Julianne Moore only shot for like 4 days because she was making the Jurassic Park sequel.
The Lost World.
Yes, while this was happening. And they really wanted her. And she was like, well, here's the days that I'm free. So they crammed all of her scenes into a week's worth of shooting. And Sam Elliott was there for all of 2 days. And of course, he came back to loop the whole prologue. But all he had to do to arrive is just sit at the bar. Speaking of, Sam Elliott plays the stranger. Man with a fondness for a good sarsaparilla.
Fucking sexy voice. There's just something about Sam Elliott's voice.
He's the white Morgan Freeman. He really is.
Yeah, he is.
I've never heard him referred to as that before. Isn't he kind of canceled now? Ish, a little bit.
Yeah, he is.
A little bit.
He made some problematic statement at some point, but I don't think that it was a big enough deal to cancel. I mean,
it was about gayness in the Wild West when Benedict Cumberbatch's show came out on Netflix. And
I like Power of the Dog. I like that movie. Not everybody did, but I liked it.
I didn't love the movie, but certainly they were gay men in the Wild West. I mean, yes.
I mean, hello, Brokeback Mountain.
Okay, those are not real people, but sure.
As much as I do love him, I mean, I liked his narration in the beginning of the movie. I didn't feel like we needed it at the end of the movie.
I agree.
It was so not counterproductive. It was so, what's the word?
The joke had kind of been played out.
Yeah, it was anticlimactic to have him start. I don't know. It was just a really bad ending to me.
But so many people had so much to say about the fact that during this whole long prologue, where he speaks quite eloquently in this completely scripted out way to introduce this movie, when you finally see the dude, he says, sometimes there's a man. Sometimes there's a man. Not really a man, but sometimes. And all of a sudden he gets tripped up in his own words. People have so much to say about that as a
people have
device.
Too much time on their hands.
What do they have to say about that?
Just because this movie, they say, this is your first clue that the movie doesn't really follow kind of your typical narrative structure that blah, 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 blah. I mean, listen, people love this movie and they formulated deep opinions about so much of what goes on here. One of my favorites was, though, this idea. There's this half an hour video on YouTube called The Secret Meaning of the Big Lebowski. And it's all about how this movie is all about masculinity. And they showed a million clips to back it up. And I was like, okay. I didn't notice all of this, but I get it. It's coming through. But the idea that the dude kind of represents kind of the antithesis of old Hollywood masculinity, either it's an attack on toxic masculinity or it's saying that, men need to be real men again. Although if a real man is Walter, please no. But it was just this interesting, it's kind of an examination of what it means to be a man. In fact, they get into it between the Big Lebowski and the dude, what makes a man, and one of the funniest lines in the whole thing, well, that and a pair of testicles, man. Which is, his point is, anybody can be a man. A man is not defined by these ultra masculine traits. It's if you have balls, you're a man and you can, be a go with the flow kind of Zen dude like the dude, or you can be a type A like the Big Lebowski.
Or maybe, just maybe, you're supposed to be a mix of the two and like somewhere in between, like Donnie, because most of the time Donnie was framed between the two of them in the movie. And maybe he's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B.
See, Allie, this is what happens. Matt's totally doing it now. Like this is how you.
I hear it.
This is how you fall down the Lebowski rabbit hole. Okay, let's get into some. We're getting into the honorable mention territory. I really didn't mean to make the cast list this long, but there's just like so many people in this movie. She is kind of important to the plot, and this was her very first film. So let's talk a minute about Tara Reid as Bunny Lebowski, the trophy wife.
She was exactly as good as she needed to be.
How old is she in this movie? That's what I want to know.
I'm early 20s.
Okay.
22, 23.
Yeah, because I was trying to think about how old she was in American Pie. But she was in like mid-20s at least, or upper 20s, I think.
I looked her up. She's born in 45. She's a year older than I am. So
45?
I mean, not 45. No, sorry. She was born in 75, not 45.
Oh, she's 2 years older than I am. Okay.
She was there painting her toes green. She'll suck your dick for $1,000. I mean, she was Bunny.
Bunny.
And she did. It's interesting. I mean, it's a tiny thing. She did well. Apparently, a lot of people who were like Charlize Theron auditioned for this role.
Really?
And a couple of
that
other.
Would have been a waste of Charlize Theron.
Probably. But, I think she was new to Hollywood, so it was a tiny little thing. But you do have basically 2 minutes of screen time to be an annoying trophy wife that somebody would actually be happy was kidnapped and was gone. Like, you had to kind of get all of that across in a very, very short amount of time. And she did it. Okay, moving on. Peter Stormare as Uli Kunkel, otherwise known as Nihilist Number 1, or Carl Hungus is his porn stage name in this movie. Only mention him because he was the guy who was putting Steve Buscemi's leg in a wood chipper in Fargo. So he's kind of
twice.
Yes, he's a bit of a Coen Brothers staple. And then way down into the cameos, Flea, the bassist of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, was Nihilist Number 2.
I love him. He's done some acting, and I think that he could do it. Like, if he wanted to quit, rock and roll life, I think he could be a pretty decent character actor.
Yeah, I mean, always in these little kind of, but
thuggish kind of roles.
Absolutely fine. I did not recognize her until I looked at the cast list. Amy Mann. Singer-songwriter, formerly Until Tuesday, was the nihilist woman, the woman who had to order her pancakes and finish and was missing a toe.
Dun, dun, dun.
Underneath the little diner table. David Thewlis, who is an amazing actor, and I spent the whole scene going, who is that guy?
Yes.
As Knox Harrington, the weirdo who was at Maud's place with like the John Waters mustache, who was giggling on the phone. Brilliant British actor. Just, I can only think 25 years ago it was one of those things he was probably known enough that it was like, hey, do you want to be in our movie for like a day? Sure.
He's really good in the Harry Potter movies too.
Yes, he is. He's Lupin in the Harry Potter series. Yeah.
Wait, that's who that was?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then final cameo, Carlos Leon, who is probably best known for being Madonna's ex-boyfriend and the father of her daughter, Lourdes, was the guy who punched Jeff Bridges' lights out when he woke up on his new rug when Julianne Moore is standing nearby. He was there for like literally 2 seconds, and you just saw his fist meet the camera, and that was the end of Carlos in this movie, but there he was. So that's our stacked cast. Of The Big Lebowski. Love the movie or hate it. The cast is amazing. They all did a great job. Let's talk a little bit about The Great White Lebowski. Wow, this movie was super white. So much so that we're starting to notice, I think we're getting better at noticing that when a film is set in Los Angeles, this movie didn't really look like Los Angeles. Very little diversity. And what there was, Jesus Quintana was a pederast, and B, played by a white man. So that's a little problematic. If made today, what do you think would be naturally a little bit different?
I think a lot of the background actors, I mean, even if you left the main cast as they are, I think you would have to add a little bit more, diversity into the background of what you're seeing. You know what I mean? If you specifically wanted, say, like the main players like Jeff Bridges, John Goodman, and Julianne Moore, fine. But I think a lot of, either support or the background has to show some diversity culturally.
Like Brant doesn't have to be white. Like, a lot of the people at the bowling alleys don't have to be white, all white. The people in the diner, yes, definitely. Like, let's get the people who live actually in Los Angeles and, fill out.
Yeah. I mean, even the diner waitress that comes over to shush, John Goodman, does not have to be a white lady. Maud Lebowski doesn't need to be white. I mean, she could be the biracial daughter of the Big Lebowski, easily.
Yeah, sure.
Although I love Julianne Moore. Sorry, Julianne. But, Ben Gazzara, I mean, again, we're getting into some, asshole territory. Doesn't need to be, although it's probably better that he's a white guy because he's such a dick. Same with the nihilists, only because it was so funny that they were all like German from this German, techno band called Autobahn. Hilarious. But yeah, I mean, it's super, super duper white movie. And it just kind of was like, I think we were talking before we started recording, and it's something that we all just kind of noticed. But I think we're getting better at this. I think in 2023, we're noticing that this is happening and that it's not okay, and so that we are, making a few changes to that. And I think it's better for the stories. It's better for the movies. It's just a more accurate look at what our world looks like.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're shooting a movie like this that, is just kind of a movie in a place that exists in a time that exists, and you want it to reflect the makeup of wherever you're shooting this movie.
Yeah.
Because otherwise then it's fantasy.
Yes. And in much the same way, Fargo, even though Fargo is just as white as this one, doesn't strike me as odd because it all takes place in Minnesota and North Dakota. And you're like, everybody up there's white. Like it just, or if they aren't, I believe that they could be. And I believe there were even some Native Americans in Fargo because that's representative of that place. But this one, just LA in the early 90s, no.
Well, the only other ethnic character would be the thug that helped to attack them would be Wu. I mean, which they make a joke about calling him the Chinaman. And Walter's like, I don't think you can use that word anymore. Like Walter of all people is the person.
He's the woke one.
Okay, and finally, let's talk about the fact that nothing happens in this movie. Nothing happens. She's not even kidnapped.
Well, you don't even know. Like
everyone ends up, with the exception of Steve Buscemi, who's dead and in a Folgers can by the time this thing is over.
R.I.P.
Everyone is exactly where they started. I mean, Julianne Moore is probably pregnant if we're to believe Sam Elliott when he says that there's a little Lebowski on the way.
I didn't even think about that until we got to the end, that we really don't know if there ever was really money or where the money was. I mean, like it all is just a ploy. The entire thing is just to like kind of hide money and move it around essentially, and nothing does actually happen. I mean, did he get the rug at the end? Did he get a new rug? I forget. To help pull the place together?
I don't think so.
No. In fact, somebody told Joel Cohen that would have been a great ending for the movie, is putting the rug down, because the whole thing did start from the rug.
Yeah.
Somebody peed in his rug and he was pissed off. And so that's,
give me the rug. Yeah,
from that, we get a movie. But yeah, it just kind of, everyone's kind of where they started. I mean, with little details, like the rug is missing, Julianne Moore's pregnant, Donnie's dead, R.I.P. Donnie. Everyone else is kind of exactly where they started, but we don't even know who are the nihilists? How did they even know that Bunny was gone? Because Bunny was apparently just visiting some friends. So where did this ransom note even come from?
Because she was having sex with, what's his name?
Jackie Treehorn?
No.
With Carl Hungus.
With Carl Hungus. Because he was the one in the pool, so they were kind of dating.
Okay. But where did he get the idea to, send ransom notes to the husband? Was that just his idea?
I guess.
Or they did it together. It was like, I've seen that before on Dateline,
Possibly. But then I think Bunny,
but we don't know. The point is we don't know. I mean, it's just like so much of this, but we don't care because the dude doesn't care. Like as soon as he's out of it, and as soon as it's like, this doesn't concern me anymore, and no one's like throwing me into the back of the limo, making me almost spill my White Russian, he just kind of doesn't care. So it doesn't really matter, man.
That's a little disappointing because generally, like when you watch a movie, you want something to happen. and the fact that nothing happens, that's kind of frustrating. But I guess at the end of the movie, I was still entertained, so I don't really care.
Well, and so maybe it's
taught me to not care.
I almost wonder if that was, in a weird way, the point of this movie, is to make kind of an anti-movie, you know, and just show people that. And because it was so entertaining getting from point A to point Z for some of us, getting a look from Allie right now. Those of us who are listening via audio, Allie is giving me a big old stink eye. But, you know, the idea that nothing happens is kind of gets right into this whole dudist philosophy of this whole thing, is just go with the flow, you know, and whatever happens, happens. And, you know, sometimes people change and sometimes they just stay the same.
So this is basically the Seinfeld of movies.
Kinda, you know, it's the comedy where nothing happens, you know. Yep. Exactly. The dude abides. You ready for some fun facts?
Sure.
Okay. All right, here we go. Jeff Bridges' character, the dude, confesses to Maude post-coitus that he once was a roadie for Metallica, and he just kind of offhandedly refers to them as a bunch of assholes. Metallica thought that was so funny. They tried to figure out a way to put that clip on the Jumbotrons in their next tour.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
The dude used to be one of their roadies, but they were a bunch of assholes. However, the Eagles' Glenn Frey was so upset because the dude fucking hates the Eagles, man, that he once angrily confronted Jeff Bridges at a Hollywood party for saying that line and besmirching the name of the Eagles.
It is a movie.
And it was a funny moment. Like, to me, the whole point of that joke was, like, I can't even get that excited about forming any kind of opinion about the Eagles. Like, it's just, they're just kind of this band that's just kind of there, you know? So the idea that somebody would be that upset, like, I fucking hate the Eagles, you know, it's like, that's what's funny about the whole thing. But, you know, apparently Glenn Frey doesn't really get jokes and doesn't really have much of a sense of humor. So, as we mentioned before, there is a popular fan theory about this movie that since Walter is really the only character to ever meaningfully interact with Donnie, that Donnie was in fact a figment of Walter's imagination and possibly a war buddy that was killed in Vietnam. And a lot of people have watched this over and over and over again. It doesn't really hold up because the dude actually does speak to Donnie 4 times in the film. But a lot of the people who, really kind of feel strongly about this particular theory say that the dude just accepts the fact that Walter occasionally looks to his right and says, "You're out of your element, Donnie. Shut the fuck up, Donnie." And maybe occasionally talks to Donnie himself just to kind of be nice to Walter. I think that's stretching a little far. Like, whose ashes were in your face at the end of the movie?
Yes. I mean, he's actually watching Walter, like, cradle Donnie at the end of the movie as he's having a heart attack. I think at that point, the dude would have been like, okay, this the dude can't abide.
Right.
There's a line in the fucking sand, man. So I don't really think it holds up. But there was another fan theory that I actually really liked. And that was that Maude was behind the whole thing. That Maude's motive was to try to get her father, who she hates, out of this foundation that they are both a trustee of. And so she decides to get Bunny out of town, have her visit some friends. She called the Nihilists because she has their album. She has a connection with them. She knows who they are. She called them and said, "Send my dad a ransom note, be here at this time to pick up the money," and blah, blah, blah. She wants to prove that he took money illegally from the foundation to pay for this ransom so that she can kick him out of the foundation, cut him off, and no longer have to give him allowance or support him in any way because she fucking hates him. And so when the money goes missing, that's when she calls Jeff Lebowski and said, the dude, and says, "Where's the money? If you get the money back for me, I will pay you back a little bit. I really want that money." Not because she needs it, because she's actually pretty rich, but she just wants to prove that her dad is a criminal, which
I can see that.
Holds up.
Yeah.
And the one bit of proof that they had was, in addition to the Autobahn album cover, which was hilarious, that in one of the dream sequences, they're chasing him with these giant scissors. apparently maybe trying to castrate him or something. That's the idea that you get. And early in the movie, one of the shots of Jeff Bridges in her apartment, there's a huge painting of a red pair of scissors behind him. And that was like her, that's like a symbol to let you know that she's behind the whole nihilist anyway.
You had me tell the painting of the scissors.
Yeah.
I mean, the painting of the scissors doesn't disprove anything, but it does just kind of, listen, like we talked about, last week with that people, very little is on accident in movies like this. They seem like little fleeting details to us, but when it takes you 4 hours to set up a scene, directors are going to look at every little detail that's even in the background. And they're going to talk about what kind of art if you're going to use big giant scissors later in your movie, I think let's put some big giant scissors on the wall, because even if there wasn't meant to be a connection, the giant scissors are kind of this symbol of castration in this whole thing. And Julianne Moore is kind of a badass bitch who intimidates men and creates feminist art that is meant to make men squirm and grab their dicks. Hence, big scissors. I mean, I definitely believe that. I think that's something the Coen brothers probably actually did think about.
I think that I'm fine with. The fact that the idea that she's completely behind it, I don't buy. Because that also lets the Big Lebowski off the hook a little bit, because he's actually doing something to get Bunny back, as opposed to actually masterminding the whole thing.
But he didn't. That's the whole joke, is that she thought he would take money out to rescue his wife. But the fact is he hated his wife, and so he took the money out, but then gave Jeff Bridges a suitcase filled with nothing.
I like the idea that the Big Lebowski set up the entire thing, was trying to get rid of his wife, wanted to steal $1 million, and was trying to embezzle it without, and this was a way for him to actually do it, and then end up with nobody being able to find the money, so nobody will ever know what was actually happening. And he just can smuggle $1 million away. I don't like because I like Julianne Moore's character. I like Maude, and I don't like the fact that, even if she was trying to kind of show that her dad's a dick, I don't like the fact that she would go through that kind of that ordeal to actually make it happen. So,
and again, I think what's interesting about this movie, what we do know for sure is that we don't know,
right?
Because the movie never tells us for certain exactly what's going on and exactly who's behind it. Final little bit of trivia. At one point, the dude calls the Big Lebowski a human paraquat, which is apparently one of the few improvised lines that actually made it into this movie. Most of this movie is completely scripted. Even all the stuff where they're all talking over each other at the bowling alley, that is absolutely all written down in the screenplay.
Huh.
Every single man, every single what the fuck are you talking about? All that stuff none of it was improvised. But at one point, Jeff Bridges threw in a human paraquat. And it's just a funny sounding word, and I laughed at it. But what I didn't know is that paraquat is a carcinogenic herbicide. And during the 1970s, the U.S. government sprayed it on marijuana fields in Mexico because it makes pot wilt pretty quickly. And they were trying to, get rid of a lot of the pot. The thing is these Mexican farmers sold the weed anyway, and it made people very, very sick. And it became called the killer weed.
Oh, shit.
And so basically someone who smokes as much pot as the dude, a human paraquat, is about the worst thing in the world you can possibly be called.
How interesting, though, that Jeff Bridges knew that and was able to come up with that on the fly.
Listen, I don't think Jeff Bridges is any stranger to the devil's lettuce, if you know what I mean.
No, for sure. For sure not. he held that roach clip with a little too much finesse.
And the way that he's kind of wet the whole thing really quickly and then back, and he knew what he was doing.
He knew what's up.
So, let's play a game, y'all.
Cool.
So this game is called The Little Lebowski. Joel and Ethan Coen, as I have said, have stated they will never make a sequel to this movie. But, that shouldn't stop us at the Rewind Project for imagining one anyway. So it's 25 years after The Big Lebowski has been made. Jeff Bridges, Julianne Moore, and John Goodman, and by the way, any other actor who is still alive, is willing and able to come back to reprise their roles to a sequel to the original film to be called The Little Lebowski. This movie will take place 25 years later. Now, remember, this movie took place 7 years in the past. So we're going to make this movie in about 2014, 15, but it will be 25 years after the original film. So what's the plot of your film? And the most important little detail for me, Maude was apparently pregnant, according to the cowboy stranger at the bowling alley bar, when this is all over. So who is going to play the offspring of Maude and the dude, and how does the kid, who is now the titular character of this new film, The Little Lebowski, how do they figure into the plot of what you're creating? Matt, we're going to start with you.
I broke the rules a little bit. So
you're a rebel, Matt.
A loner Matt, a rebel.
My Little Lebowski here is only going to be Maude's son. The pregnancy didn't take, and so she found somebody else. So my Little Lebowski is going to be played by Jorge Ledenborg Jr. I know him mostly from Bumblebee, the movie, which is actually probably the best Transformers film that they've made.
It's a real deep cut, Matt. Deep cut.
He's great at it. He's really good at it. So we also bring back Maude, the dude. Tara Reid is actually going to come back too. So the premise of my movie is Bunny is out of cash. And porn isn't doing so great because it's all moved to the internet now, and she's having a hard time with all the new competition. So she actually does kidnap Maude's kid in an attempt to squeeze her for money this time. Maude contacts the dude to recover her son because and to keep it under wraps. Because if she goes to the police or if she goes to an actual private eye, it might actually get out into the public, and she doesn't want his actual father to find out what's going on. His actual father is going to be played by none other than Jamie Foxx. And so there's going to be problems associated with Jamie Foxx as well. And so hilarity will ensue.
Okay, there you go. Allie, what's your Little Lebowski look like?
Well, I shockingly went in an entirely different direction, and I sort of didn't realize that we were setting this in 2014. I thought we were setting this in 2023, so I guess I broke the rules a little bit too. But my Little Lebowski is going to be Jennifer Lawrence, because I don't know if you've seen the trailer of her newest movie that's coming out this summer, but we stan raunchy comedy Jennifer Lawrence. That movie looks fucking hilarious. She looks fucking hilarious. And I think that she would fit right in with sort of the Coen brothers aesthetic and ideal. So she is the dude and Maude's son. She is the dude and Maude's daughter. And she works for Sam Bankman-Fried of the FTX cryptocurrency exchange. And so she is going to get Walter and the dude into cryptocurrency and NFTs and that whole thing that I don't really understand, and Bitcoin and all that stuff. So she's going to facilitate that, and then it's all going to come crashing down to a halt. And so we have to pick up all of the pieces towards the end of the movie. So
okay,
love it.
I feel like they would be the type of people that, dude's mysterious money, or, maybe Walter, became a bounty hunter or something like that and has a little bit of money, and she gets them to invest in this cryptocurrency exchange. And then we all know what happens from there. So.
Okay. Great questions. That could be like back in when cryptocurrency was like nothing. I mean, that could be one of those things that,
Sure.
Because I think it was around then. It just wasn't, as known to be corrupt now. So it would actually be like, this.
Yeah, maybe they're like the founders of it or whatever. Yeah, like got it at the bottom line.
Yeah. So my Little Lebowski is, I was just going through Google, as I do when I play a lot of these games, kind of, who's an actor who's about this old? And I came across this picture of Elle Fanning, who looks she looks just like Julianne Moore. I mean, put the two of them in a scene together as mother and daughter, and I would absolutely believe that they were related. So, and I think she could play this kind of funny, kind of comedy-ish. So in mine, she unfortunately takes after her grandfather more than her mother would like. So she's kind of become like the anti-dude, like this total capitalist kind of, but she wants to find her father, who in my version is the dude, but because of some farcical misunderstandings, she eventually, tracks down the dude at the bowling alley and believes that Walter is in fact her father, and is appalled that this man would be, and John Goodman is still the same. I'd bring back the yellow sunglasses. He'd have that fucking chin strap beard. Everything about him would be 100% the same. And as well as the dude, because like the dude abides, like he just does not change. And they're still sitting at the bowling alley doing their thing. But when she goes to find her dad, Julianne Moore thinks that she has been, kidnapped or has been taken somehow because she won't answer her text or whatever. And so the whole thing starts again. It's a kidnapping that's not a kidnapping. And here's this girl who we don't really know why is trying to get closer to Walter. And of course, Walter thinks that she's flirting because he doesn't have a child. And so wouldn't put two and two together. Hilarity ensues. And at the end of the movie, nothing happens because it's a sequel to The Big Lebowski. And there we are.
There we are.
I think the Coen brothers are probably smart not to make a sequel. I love our games, and I think that, you all do great work, and me too sometimes, but just trying to come up with something is like, just leave it. I think some things are just best left.
I don't mind if they reuse the characters and do like a side story of something else in like the same universe. But it doesn't need to be a sequel.
No,
I mean?
I would love a Coen brothers cinematic universe where occasionally, like, Walter just shows up in somebody else's scene, just yelling at somebody for no reason, and then disappears. And that John Goodman for the Coen brothers would come back and do that.
Of course he would.
Yeah,
I'm sure. One thing I didn't mention up top was that I don't think anybody had more fun making this movie than John Goodman.
He says it's the most fun he's ever had on set in his entire career.
Yeah.
That just doing this movie was a joy from beginning to end, and period, end of story. So here we are at the end of our conversation about The Big Lebowski. As you know, we always end our shows with a round of skip, rent, or buy. Skip means, why did you make me watch this movie? I hated it. In other words, I hate the fucking Eagles, man. Rent means, it was okay. That's just like your opinion, man. But I don't need to watch it again. Buy, I need to watch this movie over and over and over again. It really ties the whole group. So we're going to go in reverse order as we always do. Allie, break the suspense. Where are you?
Yeah, well, I do really hate the fucking Philadelphia Eagles, man. So, I'm a skip. I watched it a few years ago, maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. I remember absolutely zero except for the bowling. I don't know. Was I drunk? Was I high? I don't know. I feel like I was in some sort of altered state because that's probably how you should watch this movie. But the effect of that was that I didn't remember it. And so I was like, I don't think I like this movie. I'm pretty sure that I didn't, but I'm going to give it a college try, clear as a bell. And no, I don't. I laughed very rarely. I thought the story was dumb, and these types of movies not for me. Not for me with these types of characters. So I'm a skip. I don't ever need to see this movie again.
Okay, Matt, where are you?
Well, I bought this movie because it was on sale before we watched it, and so in anticipation of thinking I would probably want to buy it, and I would have. I really enjoyed it. I would sit down again on a Saturday if I was looking for something to watch that's just like, I need something mellow, that nothing really happens, and I can just sit down and enjoy it. I would watch this movie again in a heartbeat. So I'm a buy.
Okay, I saw this movie over at Matt's place, and he was like, oh, I own it. And I'm like, oh, well, that's convenient. We don't have to rent it from anywhere. And he said, yeah, I bought it for $5. And we watched it. I laughed my ass off. I came home. I bought it for $5.
Oh, Jesus Christ almighty.
I am another buy on this movie. It's just a fucking delight, man. I mean, this whole, from beginning to end, it's
a White Russian.
Howling. It is a White Russian on celluloid. It absolutely is. It's smooth and creamy. It just goes down. Nothing really happens. It doesn't need to. It's hilarious. And in a way, after watching a lot of these, overblown conspiracy theory rabbit hole videos, I do think it does have a little something to say about just that whole philosophy of just not letting shit get to you, and that's who the dude is. He doesn't care. He is the most apathetic, lazy character in the world. And that's usually a bad thing in kind of our whole capitalistic overachiever kind of mentality. But I think there are some good facets to that kind of outlook. And I think that this movie just kind of explores that a little bit. I don't think it's that deep, but it's It's hilarious, and I will absolutely watch this film again, 100%.
I mean, I love to laugh. I love to make other people laugh. I'm not a joyless person, but this movie did not click with me.
Not everything is for everybody, and that's fine. But, it's interesting. A skip and 2 buys. I don't know that we've ever had that result at the end of a rewind, because 2 buys is a pretty rare occurrence anyway. But then paired with a skip, that's just interesting. But you know what? Diversity, we love it. Here we are.
We're more diverse than the movie.
Yes. Well, next week we are going to be talking about the film that the Washington Post agrees should have won Best Picture in 1998. It did not, but it should have. Elizabeth is on deck for next week, which introduced the world to the powerhouse that is Cate Blanchett. Joseph Fiennes is also in this movie and just as sexy. So, hey, it's also got that going for him. Please join us to wrap up our 1998 ride with Cate Blanchett in Elizabeth. We will see you then. Until then, I'm Eric.
I'm Allie.
I'm Matt.
Be kind. Rewind.
You've been listening to The Rewind Project. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, and Google Play. Please subscribe and rate us. It helps a lot. We love your comments and questions. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and via our new phone number at 202-618-2402. Thanks for listening. Be kind. Rewind.
So there we are. Stranger in the Alps.
Stranger in the Alps.